the Wednesday Club.
Welcome to the Wednesday Club.
Neither of us is behind the counter this week. What's going on?
Oh, we've got a Professor Dr. Hauser.
Professor Master, technically, because I have an MFA. So.
Yeah, you are a master.
Also because you're an evil Time Lord.
Yes.
Master Hauser.
Or so you thought for like a month. But that's a whole other story.
Can you blame me? Welcome back to the show, Jody Hauser.
Hey. For the Hauser How To.
Yay! I am a poor substitute for Taliesin Jaffe.
That is not true.
Well, I don't have purple hair, and purple hair is super
but you
cool.
have
He does not have your amazing
I do,
lipstick
but
and
I'm
glasses.
wearing-
I have to like put this down. You look fabulous.
Thank you. I had to feel like professional today because and academic and stuff.
We asked you to come here because we've been talking a lot about comic book stuff for reasons y'all will find out soon. And we realized that we haven't really done like a how to write comics kind of deal. We had you here to talk a little bit about your work, but you have been kind enough to share with us the incredible gift of the actual script for the short story from your Vertigo Quarterly story from CMYK. And we're going to take an actual in-depth look today, and I'm so excited.
Yeah, so if you've ever wanted to write comics and everything, this is your chance to ask all of those questions, and we will get them answered on our Hauser How To.
Ask us your questions and get some answers.
Yes, and I would say if you think you want to write comics, make sure it's a lot of work. It doesn't pay a ton compared to like writing movies.
Look at you already.
Well, there's
discouraging.
Well, no, I think it was Gail Simone who had this great post of like, so you want to work in comics? Here is everything that makes that terrible. If reading all this didn't dissuade you from working in comics, then maybe you really do want to work in comics. So.
That's super funny.
So, but yeah, no, it's one of those things. Like, I never want people to think it's going to be like easy and like not a lot of hard work, because you don't want someone stepping into an industry that really is that, competitive and, working late nights and, waiting to get jobs and all that,
But I've had the pleasure of knowing you for many years now, and watching as you just, by the combination of incredible hustle and incredible talent, like, it is possible.
And luck. There's definitely some luck there too, just of like meeting the right people at the right time and just being the type of writer they're looking for, just as they're looking to do a specific book, that sort of thing.
I think like one of the key words that you said is hustle. Like
yeah.
like the more and more I've tried to get into writing and break into it and everything else, the more I've realized hustle is like the key thing to any of this, because
it is the Matt Key thing.
I see what you did there.
That is a writing trick called a pun.
Oh, you heard it here first, everybody.
Yes.
Puns.
We're using hustle here as a positive word that means persistence and hard work and seizing opportunities, not in the bad sense that you are running a shell game. Are you running a shell game?
I have lost track.
Well done.
If I am playing a shell game, there are 57 million shells and one like little pea, and I don't know where it is, and panic. And that's writing comics.
But hustle is an important part of it, because you have to have your day job or night job, because you have to make money, and you're not going to make money just like, you can't just go to like Marvel and be like, I want to be a comic book writer, give me money.
Does that work?
No. That's not work.
So you have to, the hustle comes in, you're building your portfolio, proving what you can do, and then after you've done that, when opportunity knocks, you can be like, oh, hello opportunity, here's why you should like me.
And I will say I wrote for 4 of the major comic publishers, DC, Marvel, Valiant, and IDW, all of them before I got to the point where I could quit my day job and write comics full time.
Yeah, and that's called hustle.
Yeah, and I've only been a full-time freelancer for since the end May last year, so 13 months now, so. And I haven't starved to death yet. I'm not homeless. And I'm fully supporting myself by writing and occasionally RPGing on this channel. It's a very weird life. But cool, but weird.
But that's such a dream. And like, I think that's like such a dream of a lot of people. But I think my experience in Hollywood and Los Angeles and trying to be a writer and everything else has taught me so often what people lack is the hustle to build their practice, build their talent, get themselves out there, build their portfolio. They'll like write 1 or 2 things and be like, I've done 2 things. Why is opportunity not knocking? Like I remember, love him or hate him, like I met with Max Landis or 4 years ago, just to be like, how did you do this? And he was like, well, I wrote 300 scripts before I ever got a manager to look at me, and I wrote another 200 before they signed me. And I was like, you wrote 600 screenplays?
That's 500.
500,
You're
whatever.
a math expert. It's
I'm
okay.
a math expert. I was like, you wrote hundreds
He's
of
probably
screenplays?
up to 600 by now.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, I wrote hundreds of screenplays. I mean, he started when he was like 15, but he still wrote hundreds of screenplays, and it's like, well, that's what it takes. So
Yeah.
Well, and as he once told us on the poll, a several hundred-page shocker fan fiction, because big nerd.
it's one of the first
So
things he
see,
ever wrote.
everything helps.
Yeah.
I may have written fanfic back in the day of
May or may not.
May have.
may have.
Probably.
May we
Probably.
Are
find out
you
what the
in a book
fanfic
on
was?
the internet?
What?
Are you in a book on the
That was
internet?
not for fanfic. That
know.
was for a fan site.
I just like all your stories.
No, there was a book that was published like circa maybe 1998, 1999 that was like Geekdom on the Internet, or so. I don't even remember the title of it. And there was a picture of the graphic from one of the web rings that I was running.
Vintage internet, y'all.
Yes, web rings. I'm not even gonna.
But
I did
Web Ring
all.
sounds like it's like in a weird illicit digital fight club. Like,
no,
Web Ring.
what?
A web ring was a
But, like-
collective of sites that would all have a bit of code at the bottom of their page, so you could jump from site to site to site
Gotcha.
that were arranged around a topic. And the particular one that was featured in the book was essentially like cool female characters.
Cool.
So from there to here, it's going well.
It's going pretty well, yeah.
So give us the how's or how to. How did you go from digital fight clubs to, I'm just kidding, not digital fight, but like from web rings to faith?
They're more like digital cuddle puddles.
How did you go from a digital cuddle puddle to faith? Tell us your story, Jody.
My story begins many, many, many years ago on the internet, as many stories do. No, I
Can we
actually.
just put that on the Geek and Sundry logo?
Begins
Many,
many,
many, many years ago on the internet.
I actually got my start in comics doing webcomics, and I wasn't necessarily doing them with the idea that I would break into professional comics writing. I was more just doing it as I had come out to LA also to do screenwriting and do the Hollywood thing, and I wasn't making any sort of progress with that, like getting an agent, any of that. So I wanted to have something that I could have visible that I could point people to, like, here is a website, look, there are things there that I wrote. So that was sort of my impetus for doing my first webcomic, and it was actually, I'd been doing like little doodles and cartooning terribly since high school, but my first day job out in LA, one of the things I learned was how to use Photoshop. I basically had on-the-job training for Photoshop, so I was able to.
What was your job? May we know?
My first job in LA was working for a plumbing fixture company and doing product photography and running their eBay store in like a terribly overheated office in a warehouse in downtown LA.
Glamorous.
And I worked there for 9
is
months.
great.
And then summer happened and it was getting up to like 95 or higher degrees every day. And I'm like, I need to find a new job before I die. So that was the end of that job. But I did learn Photoshop. So I was able to take my terrible, terrible, terrible artwork and, spend hours and hours Photoshopping it into something that looked at least intentional. So I've done a couple webcomics. The most recent one that I still would like to get back to someday is called Cupcake Pow, which you can find at cupcakepow.com.
Oh, I should have worn my pin.
Oh, yes.
I have a cupcake pin.
Yes, I gave the hosts of this lovely show cupcake pins last time as a thank you for last time I was on the show. So, but that was just sort of me just starting to get, and it was a strip comic, so it was a different form of storytelling really than standard sequential storytelling you see in comic books. But it sort of did give me a feel for like panels and pacing a little bit, and making dialogue fit in a limited space. And I was doing all the lettering and everything, the website, all of it. So I did learn to sort of rewrite on the fly, which I haven't been able to do because I haven't actually. There's only one comic I've lettered over the years.
And it was that one.
No, I actually professional. I did a short story for a horror anthology, and Eric Canetti did the art, and I lettered that badly.
So you did come in also with some different sets of skills that sort of people's mileage may vary, but for instance, you got eBay and administrative skills from, I just like shouting this out. This is not your first time behind the counter at a comic book store.
Yeah, I worked at a comic book store in college for about 6 months, and then the Pokemon card market bottomed out, and they had to lay me off because they lost like $40,000 investing in Pokemon cards.
What?
Bad. They're bad for stores.
What?
On my birthday, they laid me off on my birthday.
Because
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was my worst birthday.
They invested in too many Pokemon cards,
But
and
I mean-
the Pokemon market went bust, and they lost all their money.
Yeah.
And, like the Pokemon stock market, basically.
Yeah, because they had bought all this stock, and then it stopped selling. So, yeah.
Small businesses, y'all.
Oh,
They run on
that's
thin margins.
That shop doesn't actually exist anymore, sadly. But
What was the name of the shop?
it was called Outland Station. It was in Miami. But then I did their online store and their eBay sales for like while I was in grad school and for at least like a year after. So probably like about 4 years total. So if the Valkyries had been around back then, I would have been one.
Your grandfather did. Grandmother did, really.
I'm in Valhalla.
Yeah.
So we said the Valkyries, and I don't know. We haven't talked about it in a while.
Oh.
What are the
That
Valkyries?
should be Amy.
The Valkyries, for those who don't know, it's an organization of women who work in comic book and specialty stores, and we have a sister wing called Valhalla, which is for folks who formerly worked in them or who currently work in places like libraries, which also stock and deal heavily in comic books. It was started by our buddy Kate Leff. And it is one of my very favorite things because so many of us either had been or were in that situation before we had a name, but it is so much more exciting to have a name and to suddenly know that you're not alone, but there are literally hundreds.
And you guys have like
I
really
think we passed
influenced
600 now
Whoa.
members of the Valkyries.
Wow, and you guys have really influenced the market. I mean, because a lot of you determine what stores order, and that can determine the success of a book. So,
Oh, look at that! That's awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Good work, Chief.
yeah, and
They wear the
there's
Valkyries.
Kate's art.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so we've
that's
got a
a lot
couple
of fun.
questions that are going to go right along with what you're saying.
I was going to lead in one more thing. The other thing that you alluded to here, the set of skills you came in with, and not everybody does this, but you actually went to school to write.
Yes, I went and for undergrad I had a English degree with a creative writing focus, and then for grad school I got my MFA in creative writing with a screenwriting focus. So.
Oh. Now, tagging off of that, what I would like to say is if you want to be a writer and you do not have a degree in creative writing or did not study that, it does not matter. Just write.
Get
Yeah,
your
no,
skills some other way.
There's actually very few, and especially the graduate level. Like I know Scott Snyder, I assume has his MFA because he's teaching, and that's a terminal degree, so you need that to teach. And I know Marguerite Bennett was in his grad program that he teaches at, and I don't know who else in comics has a master's degree in creative writing.
Yeah,
So super not necessary.
It's super not necessary and it's probably relatively rare, but I've never done that research, so I can't make
I
that
would
claim.
recommend, even if you don't go to school for writing, try to find like writing groups or writing workshops
Yeah.
because you definitely need to get used to getting criticism.
Yes.
And
So a
more,
skill unto itself?
yes, and even more importantly, determining useful from not useful criticism.
Yeah.
I'm dramatically pointing, you can't tell. Sounds
bit
really
of
helpful.
a bit of a cheaper way to do that might be to do like a community college course in it or something like that.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
Like I think you can find community college courses for like under $200.
Yeah, and I haven't looked into it, but there's probably online courses and online groups now that
Yeah.
do a lot of that.
So yeah, look into that.
How do you tell
yeah.
a good feedback from bad feedback? There's not a lot
I
in
mean,
here.
a lot of it's instinct, and this is something that I've had to learn working with editors on comics is that sometimes they offer suggestions that don't feel right for like, how to improve a scene or, fix something. But that doesn't mean that they're incorrect about the underlying problem. And I've never had an editor that if I gave them a different approach to fixing a problem that they pointed out, that different than the solution that they suggested, I've never had an editor who had an issue with that because I was fixing the problem, and that's the important part.
Yeah,
Nice.
anytime I've got notes on anything, it seems like it's more like the note is symptomatic of a problem that is bigger than that one specific note.
Oh, that too. That's definitely a thing too. So it's sort of, you have to get to the point where you can very objectively look at your own work and not be super precious or like, but I love that line, I love that scene, you don't be that person.
Yeah.
Like a good rule that I give myself is like, if I get notes and I'm not happy with them, I'll give myself like 5 minutes to be like, "Rrr," and then I'll sit down and do the work and fix it. It's like, get it out of my system and then fix it.
Will you please do like a Facebook Live video the next time you get frustrated by notes of you just going for 5 minutes?
We usually just get up and walk around or something and step away from the computer.
I just love to think of you like sitting for 5 minutes just doing that one thing.
My buttons are like hitting the table.
That's okay. You're a professor. That's you command the class. You can do that.
I don't have elbow patches though, so I don't know how
okay. You don't have a
professory
PhD.
I
We need to get Jody elbow patches.
You don't have your PhD yet. That comes with a PhD.
Oh, okay, that's true.
Those are the PhD patches.
That's the master's jacket.
But I have a terminal degree, so that's the equivalent.
It sounds like you died.
It-
I just have to throw that out there.
I mean, I did.
Every time
but
you say terminal degree, I'm like, but you're not dead, Jody. You're
A
here.
toast of Jody
a
Hauser.
terminal degree means that the degree stops there. Like there isn't really a standard PhD in creative writing. So MFA is basically as high as it
It
goes.
is, yeah.
Makes sense.
So, but that qualifies you to teach at a university level.
Nice.
Oh, which begs the question: why are you not teaching?
Because I'm
We
writing.
need her to write. We need her to write.
I know. I don't want her to stop. I was just
Trying to
kidding.
take Jody Hauser
I was
comics
just
out of the
kidding.
world.
I'm not.
It's his evil plan. It's been his evil plan all along.
Ever since I was born, I knew. I'm coming after you, Hauser. All right.
That would be uncanny indeed.
Ryu Red Wing says, question, how on earth do you even get started, even start getting into a business like this? It feels like it's this huge landscape that's impossible to know where to start and poke around in.
Well, that's a question that comes up on panels a lot, and it's always phrased as, how do I break into comics? And
Yeah.
there's sort of two ways to answer that. A, you make a comic, and congratulations, you're in comics. You are a comic creator, you have made a comic. But a lot of people actually mean, how do I get into comics that pay me money to make comics? And it's actually the same answer. Make a comic on your own first. I got my start doing short stories for anthologies, and they were all unpaid to start. A lot of them were for charity, Womanthology.
How did you find them?
I found them through Twitter. And I know Tumblr's a bigger outreach for some of that these days. A lot of anthologies that are going to be funded by Kickstarter or similar means, they'll often have open posts asking for, people to submit their story ideas and their pitches. So just sort of keep an eye out for that sort of thing. But that was essentially how I built up my portfolio, like you mentioned, like having a portfolio that shows you actually have some idea what you're doing. Because, you can't walk up to DC or Marvel and be like, I have a great idea for Batman or Spider-Man and have no proof that you actually have any skill in making a comic.
Yeah. So I'm going to break this down to like the most elementary possible thing. You said you found stuff on Twitter, you found stuff on Tumblr. How did you search for that?
Actually,
Does that make sense? Like, is that?
I was kind of luck for me, but actually it doesn't have to be for you because I found it because of friends sharing things. But there are a lot of people who are indie comic creators, professional comic creators that you can follow on social media, and they will either be, if they're working on a project like that, or they have friends they'll be sharing it. So you can find it the same way I did.
So so on Twitter it would be friending artists and writers who were like up and coming, like finding them on Tumblr, stuff like that, and just following them, hearing what they're doing, and then maybe jumping on. Oh,
Keep
that
track
sounds
of
cool.
the
Yeah.
smaller publishers who are out there. Find folks who tend to share calls for submissions.
Yeah, follow people like Spike Trotman. Wow.
Always follow Spike Trotman.
Always follow Spike Trotman, who she has done at least 20 some Kickstarters, I think, at this point for different anthologies. Iron Circus Comics.
This is the reason Make Your Own Comic is not just a joke, because eventually, if you make your own comic and then you eventually run a campaign and publish that comic, and then you start publishing other people's comics, she literally started a production company or a publishing company.
Amazing.
Just because no one else was publishing that stuff, so she did.
And she's doing the kind of comics that she wants to see in the world. And that's actually a great starting place for anyone. If there's a type of story that you feel should be told in comics that no one's telling, tell that one.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we should ask our friend Noelle Stevenson, who wrote and drew Nimona, a really wonderful comic. She started serializing it online, just putting up a page at a time like many webcomics do. And then at some point in that process, there was a book deal. And I still don't know exactly how that happened, because it was like, put it online for free, you have a book deal with Scholastic, and you're nominated for a National Book Award. But that's a real thing that can happen, because she just
I wouldn't count on it. I mean, that's the sort of
it's
thing.
An outlier.
I heard a great story or a great metaphor for breaking into comics. Someone said it's like breaking into comics is like breaking out of prison. As soon as someone does it one way, it's going to be sealed up, and no one else is going to be able to get in that specific way.
That is amazing. I love that.
So it's like, don't think you can replicate someone else's success the exact same way just because it happened before, because there's going to be 50,000 other people who are like, hey, that person did it exactly this way. I'm going to do that too. No, like, find your own way.
Yeah, it seems like every single story is relative to that individual. Like, this is how I got
Everyone's way in is different.
I mean,
apparently.
I still think the best comics origin story is Gerard Way, who wanted to get into comics, but first became a rock star. And then got into comics.
That's one way to do it.
I mean, because he was actually an intern at DC, and he went to art school.
That is my favorite factoid.
Really?
Yeah. Gerard Way was an intern at DC.
What?
Yeah. No, he was on the path to make
my
comics.
God,
That
that's
was his
amazing.
goal, and then
he got distracted by becoming a rock star.
He was in New York during 9/11, and he was just like, I need to do music. And so it was like that experience led to My Chemical Romance, but the drive to make comics never went away. So that's when he did like Umbrella Academy after, the band, I think the band was still.
They were still around.
Yeah, when he did Umbrella Academy, and now he has his own imprint at DC Comics. So.
And they publish such wonderful up and coming writers as Jody Hauser.
What?
So when did that happen? It's pretty bloody exciting. You are one of the primary writers of the Young Animal imprint. What's an imprint?
An imprint is sort of a subset of a bigger publisher that has a very specific focus. So Vertigo is a very well-known imprint for DC, and they were focused on like darker and more mature reader stuff, and now they have shifted over to doing creator-owned. So Young Animal is a new imprint at DC, which is focused on mature reader stuff that sort loosely ties into the larger DCU. And Mother Panic is probably the closest tied to the major DCU because it's set in Gotham. And Batman shows up there. There's a sort of familiar looking dude on the cover there whose name is
Commissioner Gordon.
It is Batman.
Oh, it's Batman?
Batman.
Batman?
Batman.
Batman.
It's
This original character that you made up for Mother Panic.
Oh, what we're talking
Look,
about?
Bill Finger's been ignored long enough.
While we're on the subject of Batman,
Sorry.
No, it's fair.
we should acknowledge the passing
Google Bill
of
Finger.
Adam West, which is very sad.
Oh yes, who was my first Batman, along with a lot of people. And to be fair, when I was a kid and Batman the Animated Series came on, I kind of stopped watching Batman 66 for a long time because I'm like, this is what I've always wanted Batman to be and didn't know. But if you go back and especially like watch the movie, it's still like there's just so much joy there.
It's so fun. It's really, really fun. I grew up actually not liking the 66 Batman. But I think it was mostly because my mom and dad didn't care for it. So I was like, well, my mom and dad don't like it, so it's a stupid show. But then I started watching it in my 20s and I was like, this show's amazing. I was an idiot. I was a dumb child.
It's the reason I first fell in love with Catwoman and Batgirl.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and we've got is Roundtable season 2, is that a thing that's been announced, or is that something? Okay, never mind. I was going to reference something that happened to us over the weekend, but never mind.
What are you talking about, Matt?
We're extremely good at mysteries.
I didn't mean to be. As soon as
What
I
an
started to say it, I was
extraordinary
like,
coincidence
wait a
that
minute.
we're in the mood to talk process with Jody Hauser, just as we always are.
Yay!
But so at the first appearance of Batgirl, Batman 66, created for the show.
that Batgirl, because there was a previous Batwoman and Batgirl who were created because of Seduction of the Innocent, and you guys talked about some of that on this show, didn't you?
We haven't done a full-on code episode, but we
you've
reference
mentioned
it every
it,
couple
We
weeks.
totally should, though. That's another episode.
That's another episode.
Yeah.
As the T-shirt will say. All right, we've got a lot of questions here. So Running Fool 11 says, what do you suggest for building your portfolio? Where should a potential comic writer start?
Like I said, I started with short stories, and I actually highly recommend doing shorter stories to start. I mean, you might have the idea for your 90 issue, epic saga. Sagas don't call your comic saga. That's already been taken.
But you can't call it Agus, and that's saga backwards, right?
That's actually Brian K. Vaughan's next comic.
Agus.
No. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, short stories are the place to start, I think, and I'm very grateful that's where I started because it really teaches you how to utilize the page limit and the limited number of panels per page. You know, if you do like a 4-page story, you know, you have maybe 20 images in which to tell the entire story. And that really makes you think really, really, really hard about the moments that are important and how to pace it out. And it just, I think it's the best way to get a feel for writing comics because I came in with the screenwriting background and I was awful at first. Like it's a very hard to go from writing where you're thinking about sound and motion to writing essentially freeze frames. That's not an easy change.
Yeah, no, I dealt with that the first time I tried to write a comic book. I was just like, how does this work? Because I have a screenwriting background as well. And I was like, I don't know. And I just stopped for like a good week while I went and had to like switch my brain.
I stopped for a year and I spent a year just reading, like rereading everything I had and reading new stuff.
Reading like stuff like this and like.
Actually, the book that I had for writing comics was like the like DC Comics Guide to Writing Comics.
Sure.
Nice. They had a whole series
That's
of books for like all the different production stages of comics, which was really cool. But that book I found super handy, and these weren't. I don't. This one is
relatively new.
Yeah, I know, and I don't think even panel 1 was out yet, or I didn't have it yet.
Panel 1 is just it's literally just comic book pages.
And
like,
you can find scripts online, and I will warn you now, especially if you have a screenwriting or playwriting background and you're used to scripts having very specific formatting requirements, like this margin is exactly this much, and if you do it wrong, people will shoot you in the face. You know, that doesn't work in comics. Comics doesn't have a set scripting format. Some publishers have preferred scripting formats. Most writers have sort of developed one that works for them. We'll get a look at mine. Actually, mine from a couple years ago, so it's even changed a little bit.
Well, while we're on the subject, let's take a look at some actual scripts from actual like comic book writers. So here's
You brought this in, right?
Yeah. So
Nice.
here's a page from Marv Wolfman on the man called what is this? It's
Just a sample.
yeah, it's just a sample of the man called AX #5. So here's this one.
Oh my gosh, that is so many words.
That's a lot of description.
The way he's got
Oh.
it broken down is, it seems like it's a combination of the Marvel method, which we should get into, but
Which
also
I've actually done. So.
Nice.
like it looks like page 8. Here's what's going on. Page 9. Here's what's going on.
And there's not
Page
dialogue
10, page
broken
11.
out
There's
of
no
that.
dialogue in this. It's literally just. So on page 8, we see another flashback of her naked in the alleyway, shadows playing
Of course we do.
on her, so we don't see anything. We see a final picture of her in detox, doctors filling out forms while she's strapped to her hospital bed, screaming so he's
Sounds like a fun story.
Yeah.
so
Dramatic.
he's just describing it, but
yeah.
to
But you're telling us what we see.
yes, to prove Jody's point, here is let me get to it. Sorry, I want to show. Miracle Man by Neil Gaiman,
Nice.
#17. Completely different format. You see it? So, and this is how his script actually looks. So, he's got page 4, page 3, panel 4, page 4, panel 1. So it's always different the way you do it.
I like that his description is all in caps. It's like he's yelling at the artist.
Yeah.
I could never do that.
So, but
I feel so bad.
But Jody makes a good point. The description is, they are much smaller and they have begun to climb the stairs away from us. Tilt it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chief.
that's
yeah,
better.
light's hitting it.
And then it says, caption, fear, caption, sheer, stark, terror, and hope. Caption, going up, page 4. So he's got like dialogue in a different way and his actions and stuff like that in different ways. So there's no right or wrong way to write a comic, it seems.
I mean,
So-
there's wrong ways to write a comic,
No,
but
sure.
your editor will hopefully let you know if you're doing it wrong.
Yes, because there's typically no specified format
gosh.
unless you're working for like a bigger company.
They're using
even
fonts
that-
as suggestions in this one. In this Astro City script, which I presume was by Kurt Busiek, probably.
Busiek. How do you say Busiek? I've always said Busiek.
I've always said
That's-
Busiek, but I don't know. what's right.
I am curious where the all cap description comes from because that's not something I've really seen. So I wonder if that's a
Well-
little bit more of a older trend.
I think it might be. I think some of these are a little bit older because what we see like with Bendis here, Bendis writes in Final Draft.
And there are definitely writers who do that. I write in Word. I write screenplays in Final Draft and comic scripts in Word.
You, and it looks like Greg Rucka.
He writes also in Word?
Sure looks like it. This is just sort of standard, breaking it down piece by piece.
Yeah, and he does a different sort of spacing for the dialogue.
Looking for something special. This is great. I have not read this.
Oh yeah, it's really good.
I'm pretty sure I have a copy of that somewhere.
This is a Spider-Man script from Bendis. You can see there he's kind of mostly got it in Final Draft. It looks like. So
Whereas
sorry to jump.
Dwayne
keep jumping back
McDuffie,
and
who
forth,
also
Chief.
worked in animation, is just using script format that we would recognize from screenplays.
Yeah, there's definitely some writers who stick very close to like a screenplay-esque format, but I sort of had to break out of that to get my head
And this
around the
is-
different formatting.
You said this
Nice.
is Dwayne McDuffie.
Yeah?
Yeah. That's a Deathlock script. I remember reading that one. So yeah, there's no right or wrong. Well, plenty of wrong ways, but in terms of formatting, you can write it in Word. You don't have to go buy an expensive Final Draft program or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually write portions of scripts on my phone sometimes when I'm like in IKEA or so. I've written a weird number of script pages in IKEA.
Yeah.
IKEA in Burbank is super nice though.
It is, and you can go in there and just kind of get lost and just find a couch.
Especially
and just
now, it's like
sit.
twice as big.
Oh, it's massive. I
Yeah.
think it's
I
like
haven't
the
been
second
to the new
biggest
one yet.
It's the biggest one in the U.S., I
in
think.
the U.S. I
Yeah.
think it's the second
Crazy.
biggest in the world.
Anyway, so the secret to writing comics, IKEA.
IKEA. Now, the other thing that we should that I would want to point out while we're on the subject of like actual formatting is the difference between like the typical like plot outline kind of script or not just typical script.
Full
but then
script, I think, is
then,
the term
yeah, the
most
full
people
script and
use,
then the
yeah.
Marvel method.
And I've done both. I mostly write full script, which is actually, it's like page 1, panel 1, this happens, this dialogue. Panel 2, this happens, this dialogue. So that's pretty much what people refer to as full script because you're sort of fully scripting out the comic. Marvel method, which was pioneered by Stan Lee, goes back to the early days of Marvel when Stan Lee was writing all of their comics. And it was he would do more essentially like an outline, and then the outline would go to the artist, and I think it wasn't even usually page breakdowns. It was just sort of like, in this issue, this stuff happens, and then the issue would get drawn, and then it would go back to Stan, and then Stan would put in the dialogue and thought bubbles and all of that. So
The classic example is sort of him talking, say, to Jack Kirby about Fantastic Four and being like, in this one, they'll fight this kind of alien, and I think this should happen, and go home and do that. And Jack Kirby, who was a genius, of course, would go home, draw the entire thing, and then Stan would fill in the dialogue.
Fill in the dialogue.
And
yeah.
I did I did a little bit closer to full script than that with Tana Ford when I did a Guardians of the Galaxy story for Avengers No More Bullying, which was my first work for Marvel. And
So
actually
cool.
Tana's first work for Marvel, too.
Oh, nice.
And she has most recently been drawing Silk. The way we did it was a little more like page 1, all these things happen. And I think there was a couple like indications of panel breaks, but no dialogue. And that was sort of one of those projects where our team came on a little bit later, so we basically needed to get the artist drawing right away, which is, I think when that sort of method is used most often is because it takes a lot longer for an artist to draw an issue than it takes for a writer to write one most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's some really slow writers, but I mean, a good example is like, write the word the Eiffel Tower, then try to draw the Eiffel Tower, see which one takes longer.
Yeah. Yeah. While we're on this subject, we should point out that there's a reason that you typically don't see a comic book writer's script, and that is because the script is intended solely for the beginning of that production process. It's more or less a letter.
Yeah, so when you've written
to
the script,
the artist.
would you say like I wrote a comic, or are you like no, I wrote a thing that might be a comic?
I wrote a comic script is generally how I'll say it. Like when the actual comic comes out, I'll be like, I was the writer for that, but I would never term it as my comic because there are a whole bunch of people who go into putting a comic together. And, a comic script, no one wants to read a comic script. Like even people who work in comics don't want to read a comic script. I mean, editors read comic scripts because it's their job, and artists read comic scripts because it's their job. But I mean, basically, a lot of people describe a comic script as a letter to the rest of the creative team and the collaborators. Is like, this is my vision of what the comic will be. But it's one stage of the storytelling process, and the artist I should divide that up. There can be, traditionally there was a penciler, an inker, and a colorist. A lot of people do their own pencils and inks these days, and some artists also do their own colors, but having a separate colorist is also pretty common still. And the letterer, and then of course the editor who oversees everyone, make sure the collaborators don't kill each other and make sure the book gets done on time.
Is the possibility of the creative team killing each other always on the table?
It depends. I mean, most of the books I do are work for hire, so there's some instances where I don't even speak directly to the artist. Everything goes through the editor, so they're sort of like
I
the
really
touch
wanted to know
point.
how that tied into the murder question. Hard to murder when you don't know where they are, right?
Yes, or
Yes.
if you've never spoken to them, you might not have a reason to murder them. I mean, and hopefully they might have a reason to murder me because I'll be like, a crowd scene, and the artist will be like,
So
But that was the point that you were making to us before the air, was that the primary thing you wanted people to know, it's a part of it's a production document designed to
Yes.
result in a comic.
it's like you don't like do a blueprint for a building and go like, great, that's done, let's have lunch there. You know, it doesn't work that way. The building still doesn't exist. It's, you know, a
you
comic.
could have lunch on top of the blueprints, but
Yeah,
you're
it's-
not in the building.
No, it's a comic script is not a comic. It is a formative stage of a comic.
Do we want to start looking at this thing?
Yeah, let's do it. Now that
Ooh.
we've gone through it, let's break it open.
I'm very excited. We chose this partly because it is a short story. You can get your own copy of the Vertigo Quarterly, either digitally picking up this issue or finding the trade paperback that has all four. This was published in 2014 by Vertigo. They did 4 issues dedicated, roughly themed around the 4 different colors traditionally used in printing.
Yeah, which I think is still like the coolest thing because the stipulation was magenta had to be in your story somewhere. It can be a color used in the story. The story could center around something that is magenta. Yeah, so it was pretty open.
Sneak this onto, just to sort of flip through. You had some wonderful other collaborators, in this issue. Or
Yeah,
contributors to
Rachel
it were
Deering,
pretty-
I believe, wrote a story in that issue. Yeah, it's been so long since I flipped this open. I don't remember who all. My specific collaborator on the story was Nathan Fox, who did the art, the colors, and the lettering.
All right.
Wow, he did all of it.
He did all of it. And if you see his lettering, just like is very fits in. Just it does feel like it's part of the art.
Yeah, it really does.
Yes, and this was the first work I ever did for DC. So it's sort of
Gonna pull these out.
apropos to look at it today when my first trade that I
Yeah.
worked on it. Yeah.
Voila, from here to here.
Yeah.
2014, 2017.
I didn't, you know what?
That's an
I
amazing
didn't
evolution
even
over 3
intentionally
years.
wear the glasses and the lip color that are magenta, but I just realized I did. So
I assumed that was intentional.
It was not.
You,
I didn't even think
fabulously
about it, so-
coordinated.
I just was
I
like,
was like, it's a Hauser.
I was just like, gray jacket, black shirt. Let me throw some color in there. Anyway, back
how
to
do we-
writing comics.
How do we want to go through this? Shall we read a page or two and then look at the script?
Yeah, let's actually, you know what? Yeah, let's look at the script first and then point it out here, just maybe to see the evolution of how it got made. How does that sound?
Oh,
Or do you disagree? Do you think it's better to start here?
I'm thinking, because this was designed for people to encounter, let's look at this first, go back to
then
the
go
script,
back.
and then see how it changed. I like that I asked the question, but I secretly apparently had an answer, but I didn't know I did until we were
I could
having
tell
that
you had a
discussion out
preference,
loud.
and I did not.
I
so-
didn't know that I did.
sorta.
So I'm going to circle around here. So this is from Vertigo, CMYK, the magenta issue. And we are going to ruin the beginning of it by reading it right now. Do you want to
I can't see anything.
do
from
the
here.
honors? Okay.
But you could.
So what we see is some text that I should be so lucky to have a granddaughter like you. Happy birthday. Love you, love you, love you, Zoe. Hugs and kisses, Gran. And we see a little girl looking at something. And this is a signal to most of us, because this isn't contained in a bubble, that we're not hearing it out loud, but we're getting that text from somewhere, and her gaze on the book pretty much tells us that. Dad says it's time to go.
And you can, that's coming from off panel. So it's a off screen, like, hey, Dad says it's time to go, kind of a shout out.
Oh, I'm blocking you. I didn't realize they can see. Okay.
I can go over here.
So Chief, can you travel down the page now?
Oh, that's creepy. Now there's just an
Thank
eye
you.
hovering over the script.
What are you doing with Barbara Jane? Only babies carry around And this is interrupted by a look. Can you at least turn her off? Let's have a party with all of our very best friends. She doesn't turn off. First 2 pages? Sure.
Sure.
All right. We're in a room. It's very quiet.
We can see like some shadows over here. Like there's people, like the room seems to be populated, at least by my account.
Beautiful shoes can take you to beautiful places. Have to go potty. The right outfit can brighten up any day. That's stupid. A positive attitude is always the best attitude. Guys, this story.
Let's stop there.
Yep.
There's the first 2 pages. Jody, do you want to take us through the script that you wrote for this while we have it up here and people can kind of see it?
So I have to say I love what Nathan did with this art. It's amazing, and
It's gorgeous.
I didn't know until after the art was done that he actually has 2 daughters, about the age of the characters in the story, and the color palette he picked is actually the colors of their bedroom. So it just happens that like magenta and green are the colors of his daughters. But that's like why they look like sisters, because he knows what that looks like. But in the script, it's interesting because the opening lines there from the card was done as a separate panel, and he combined the 2 of them. And I think it looks I think it reads a lot better the way he did it.
Beautiful
and that's
clear.
That's sort of a thing, like a script is, again, it's a production document. If an artist has a better way to do something, I am always for that, because they're artists that they think visually a lot better than I do, because that's their job, that's their whole thing. So, and that's part of what a storytelling collaboration is. It's like you have to give the artists room to tell the story and like help make those decisions. So so that was combined, 2 panels combined from the script. And it does actually say in the script off panel to indicate when the characters are speaking off panel. Other than that, the page is, should I read a bit of the script?
We'd love
Yeah.
that. Thank you, by the way, so much for sharing this. I know it must be sort of
So,
like,
actually, I have it on my phone, so I could
show
read
us the
from my
petticoats
phone.
under the skirt.
And,
Yeah, if you want to read it on your phone,
yeah.
then we can put the script up here as an example.
Yes.
Do you want me to hold it?
Please.
Okay.
Well, just side
So
by
I'll-
side him here.
Yeah, I got it.
I'll start with panel 2, but you can see even that looks different than the scripts that were in
Chief, can
the
we
book.
get the full pages up so we can see the rotation?
Chief is the best.
So
Yes.
panel 2, which in the comic is actually kind of panel 1 and 2. A girl around 11 years old, Zoe, sits on a bed in a room in transition from child's to a teenager's. Zoe wears all black, dresses, tight, short boots. She stares down at a greeting card, swiping at her eyes with her free hand. And again, those, that's not a perfect description of what the panel looks like, but the thing the panel does is it tells the story. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, if there are details, like she's not rubbing her eyes, but she looks sad. You can tell she's sad. That's all that's needed. And actually, for the second page, there was actually, in the script,
split
there
screen
was dialogue on this panel. There was supposed to be like the shadows of the people.
Over here?
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dom.
There was dialogue here?
Yes, there, and if we can go flip that, you can see it says, like the 2 women in shadow here, it's like just snippets of a conversation. Such well-behaved girls probably don't understand. But when the art came in, it didn't feel like it was really necessary. And there's a stage in the comics production that's generally called a lettering pass, where once you get the art, you see if any of the dialogue needs to be tweaked, because maybe the emotion looks like it reads different through the art, so the dialogue doesn't quite fit. Or one thing that happens quite often is you look at the art and you're like, I don't need these words because the art says it all. Mm-hmm. Like you can see, like they look very isolated here. They're alone. This is clearly not a happy thing. There's people talking around them, but not to them. You don't need the words there to communicate that. It's all there in the art. So, it was in the script, and maybe that helped Nathan sort of get the tone. Mm-hmm. But at the end, it wasn't needed for the reader. So, yeah.
Do you want to do the rest of page 1?
The rest of page 1 is pretty close to the finish. So.
That will be wonderful
Yeah.
if we can show off
Yeah.
the transition there.
So, So here it's, Zoe's little sister Carly, 7 or so, approaches but keeps her distance as if wary of the older girl. She's also wears black head to toe. A Barbie-style doll dressed in a bright magenta ball gown is tucked under her arm. And that's pretty much a perfect description of what's happening in that panel. And then it's Zoe's line. The dialogue, for the most part, is accurate to the comic. And it's Carly's eyes well up with tears, and she clutches the doll tight to her chest. Zoe off panel, fine, whatever. Oh, that actually did get cut. So, but again, that was a thing. You don't really need, because the next panel you see the doll in the car. So clearly she didn't.
I'm trying to find the camera here for this final panel.
Yeah, and this is an interesting thing because the way you read straight across, and the way is it's scripted, and you can read it this way, is that this line is in the script first, and it is higher up.
Oh, interesting.
So, but that's sort of, again, that's one of the things that's sort of up to the reader, and it doesn't really change the reading of the panel, whichever the order. But in the script, this was higher on the script, so Nathan put it higher on the page.
No, that actually makes perfect sense. And I think reading it on my own, I might do that first. Reading it for the camera, I think I just went in some kind of like autoplay mode. But it does work both ways.
And
The color decisions Nathan made on here are so amazing.
It's amazing.
By the way.
So what now, guys? Do we want to
Page 2?
Okay, yeah, page 2.
We're just doing a walkthrough.
Okay. And actually, here's without the text. The description is pretty much what the panel is. The two girls sit alone and spaced a ways apart in an old-fashioned couch in the lobby of a funeral home, quiet and sad. White flowers are everywhere. The space decorated in dark and muted tones. That part didn't happen, but that doesn't fit the color palette of the comic. Barbara Jane sits in Carly's lap. Zoe clutches a little packet of tissues, which I think she's just holding her purse there. But again, these are details that you don't necessarily always need.
But they suggest the scene that he's about to paint.
And I actually like that she's listening to music, because that sort of like that shows the space between them even better than if they were just sitting there. So again, that's like the artist making a really great choice to communicate just the tone of something like better than I had thought of it in the script. So good collaborator, yay. And then there's the lines from the relatives, which I read before. Carly places Barbara Jane right next to her sister with care, startling Zoe out of her thoughts. And here you don't see her placing, but you see the doll. Have to go to the bathroom. Here Zoe watches her little sister tug on the sleeve of a woman, presumably their mother. No sign that it's the mom, but you don't really need to know. Zoe looks at the smiling doll next to her, annoyance beating out sadness for a moment. I think that's very clear. And then and again, there's the line. It's like the order is top to bottom rather than left to right for reading.
Did I do that?
No, you did. The right outfit can brighten up any day. That's stupid. The doll head tilts, seemingly of its own accord, still smiling. So, and I love how he framed it to look about as creepy as the description in the script. And that's, again, it's like picking up on the tone in the script, even though it doesn't say like, this should look really creepy. You know, he still got it. So a positive attitude is always the best attitude. Also, I love the fact that her dialogue is all in black here.
Yep.
It's like that. It's so creepy. It's great.
Well, and I love, like, it's what's great about what you did here in terms of the short story is that, like, from here to here in just 2 pages, we've gone from these two little girls are mourning something, and the little girl can't let go of her dolly, to this doll is actually alive in some way.
And that's, again, like, it's the working with a limited space. It teaches you to, like, get to the point pretty quickly.
But, like, just the simplicity of the head tilt is, oh, is the doll alive? Like, it's an immediate, like, clue that something different is going on, that it's not just a doll at this point. And it's very easy. Like, I think that's the power of the medium of comics, is that with just that, like, if she had been staring straight ahead, it would have been like, oh, well, she's just a doll. But just a head tilt with the eyes kind of shifted to the right, and it's an immediate, like, clue in. Like,
Suggests.
And it's one of those things, like, you tend to use a lot of shorthand in comics, and it's like, I don't need to explain like what a fashion doll is. Like we all know what Barbie is, how Barbie's supposed to look. So when a doll that looks very much like a Barbie doll, and her name is Barbara Jane, when she does something that you know a Barbie doll doesn't normally do, you don't necessarily need to call that out or make it a big production, because that's something that people pick up on. So yeah, you do have to, again, especially in a short story, figure out what can you do in shorthand, what can you do that doesn't need to be explained out in a lot of space, because you don't have a lot of space.
Yeah. And another interesting thing to point out there is that, like, in film, just like, again, like, I love the power of the medium. In film, you could have seen the head turn and all that other stuff, and that would have immediately been off tone. Like, it's like, well, now it's a horror movie. Now it's Chucky. Is she going to murder this little girl? Like, you know, like, at least that's a possibility, a possible interpretation of that particular thing. And I think it would give the wrong tone. Whereas in here, it's panel by panel by panel. You just jump right to, she's looking up. We don't really see her mouth move or anything. And it allows you as the writer and the artist to tell kind of a different kind of story,
Yeah.
I feel. So.
And again, the color palette is like this is probably not a horror story because there's no red, so there can't be blood.
Yeah.
I guess there could be pink blood, but that'd be weird.
I'm just, this is one of my favorite things that you've ever written. And
It's one of my favorite things I've ever written. So.
And just in the space of 2 pages, we have 4 characters. One who's left a card behind, one who is a doll, and 2 sisters whose relationship we are already getting strong information about. We've moved between several locations, and we have a sense of an event unfolding without you ever officially saying, and that's the beauty of the comic book script. You wrote funeral home, but he just shows us as much as we need to come to our own conclusions about what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to like a plaque behind them that's like la-di-da funeral home.
Yeah.
Like also don't call your funeral home
La-di-da funeral home?
I don't know that I want to get buried at La-di-da funeral.
Maybe you do. It sounds fun.
Yeah, maybe so. It's a party every day.
Everything's pink and green and white.
Come to the fun home. Yeah.
Come to the fun. We put the fun in funeral.
Yeah.
Okay, should we
that
get
is the upbeat song that the kids sing in Fun Home, which is hilarious. Now, how much of this do you want to share?
I mean, what time is it?
We have plenty of time.
Yeah, we could go. I mean, we're a quarter of the way through the story.
All right.
So
I wasn't sure if you wanted to.
I think we're a quarter of the way through the story. I forget how many is this. Yeah. So, do you want to?
If you would honor us with the reading, I would be.
Okay, so let me go through the script. Okay, so Barbara Jean is suddenly wearing a cheerleading uniform. That's weird. Barbara Jane, rather. We can do anything we put our mind to, even math. Go team! And there's a lot of Barbie references in here. I used to collect Barbies as a kid. And we have Zoe here looking annoyed. You don't know anything. And now Barbara Jane looks annoyed. That's not a very nice thing to say. I know all kinds of stuff. And Zoe sort of leaning down. I love the framing of this.
Let's do a straight read first and then do a commentary in a sec.
The art makes me so happy. It's hard to know.
It should.
Okay. Zoe leans down over Barbara Jane. What do you know about dead people? Which is a pretty good indication. Anyway, I'll stop commenting. And now Barbara Jane has switched again, and she's dressed like a doctor looking at a clipboard.
They can see it.
Yeah. I know they can see it. Okay, death occurs when all biological function that sustain life cease. In many countries, a person is declared legally dead when the brain activity, ... No, not that stuff. I mean, what happens after you die? An intriguing question. I'm very bad at reading comics out loud, apparently.
Nope, you're great.
You're great.
Safari outfit. Let's survey the landscape. Strange markings over yonder. How to cope with loss. Zoe, that's more the living, isn't it? There. No, not in there. Not yet. And what is your final destination today? I don't know. Somewhere else. Right this way. Please keep your belongings out of the aisles. And silent panel with open doors.
Do you want to do 2 pages at a time or do the rest of the story?
Probably 2 pages so we can sort of leave that open to look at. So
this is the second spread. Now we've gone from this sort of traveling first 2 pages to some internal experiences. Is there anything you want to share from the script excerpt for these?
Well, I'll say how the transition is described in the script for this first panel here. Barbara Jane stands unsupported on the sofa, now wearing a cheerleader's uniform in the same shade as her gown. Zoe doesn't seem surprised by the change, shifting in her seat as if to better converse. Her expression is pure defiance. So it doesn't explicitly say in the script that, like, this is weird, but it does indicate, and I think the important thing I wanted to convey here is, like, it isn't weird to Zoe.
Yeah.
So, like, the transition is a little bit seamless from, like, normal stuff in a funeral home to having a conversation with your little sister's doll.
And we've discussed effective page turns here before, and this is a wonderful one because you don't know what that head tilt at the end of the first page, the first 2 pages means, but once you turn it and she seems unfazed, you're just like, oh, it was just indicating that we're in some kind of different mode now.
Yeah, and then panel 2 is a hands on hips cheerleader. Barbara Jane loses her smile for the first time. So, you know, it's sort of like the tonal shifts that are also important to indicate in the script. This one is actually probably one of the closest to the actual panel description. Zoe leads down, looming over the doll. Barbara Jane doesn't seem too bothered by the size difference. And I just like how that's conveyed. One of the things I actually did for this story was I put together a Pinterest board and shared it with Nathan of, like, all the different specific Barbie outfits I was referencing, or the closest I could find. So he had, like, a good examples of, especially, like, the retro stuff. Yeah, so this is a cool shift. Zoe looks away from the doll to the tissue she's pressing into the sofa cushion. And that was completely ignored because he didn't utilize that earlier in the script. So he took what he had done, which was her MP3 player, and had, like, a similar gesture. So that's, like, a great example of just keeping the flow of continuity. Like, if you lose something out of the script, you know, keep going with what you're doing in terms of art. That's for the artist more.
Yeah.
I like Barbara Jane pokes at the squiggles printed on her clipboard meant to imitate writing.
Perfect.
So,
Yep.
and yeah, there's not a ton here. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward. There's a reference across these 2 panels that is sort of, like, spread out through this page. It's the dark suits and dresses scattered around the room don't seem to notice, which again is a very tonal thing. And then, of course, this open set of double doors with a photograph of an older woman on a stand right outside. Barbara Jane creeps forward as if hunting prey. Zoe hangs back scared. And because we didn't have the specific funeral home reference earlier on, that's probably the first panel where if you
It's essentially a reveal.
if you hadn't clued into what was happening yet because of the tone, there's, like, the more explicit visual reveal.
But you put it in the background and contrast it with the sort of full-on fantasy of the conversation that's happening, and that's when you first elect to give people that information.
And this I love, stewardess Barbara Jane in a magenta uniform and cap, of course, and he actually
Where's
shows
this? Sorry.
he actually shows, like, the discarded outfits to sort of indicate that she's been changing, like, actually changing clothes, not just magically reappearing.
And that was the artist's edition, not?
Yes, because that part wasn't in the script. Oops, I just lost my place on that. Oh boy, hold on. Phones.
By the way, Jody, thank you so much for being our guinea pig for this process.
Yeah.
I'm getting the
As long as
greatest
I'm not
kick in the
wrecking
world
your
out
show.
of this. Oh no, chat. I believe you will agree with me that this is the opposite of wrecking the show.
And then this panel specifically never had dialogue. That was one that was scripted to be silent, so it wasn't like
Which panel? 4? 5?
the 6. Zoe pushes open the door to see a bright pink convertible parked in the roundabout. So that was always meant to be a silent panel, as opposed to the other one where the dialogue just wasn't needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that transition there. Anything else you want to point out on this that I...
Shall we go on? We'll have time for
Sure.
questions, I think.
Are we going to do you want to do the whole story or stop halfway, or what do you think?
Jody seems willing to do the whole
I'm
story.
willing to do. It's only 1 o'clock now, so
Sure.
yeah, we can go through.
We're gonna.
Yeah. So here we have a car driving. Again, I'll stop describing what the art says. Where are we going? That's the question, isn't it? People keep talking.
Zach, can we get a close up? Thank you.
Thank
Let's
you,
just wait till we
Chief.
know it's up.
There you go.
On the full page.
Oop.
Great.
Or wrong page.
Wrong page?
Yeah.
Oh,
this
haha,
order.
monitor's backwards. My bad.
Heart of Handprint says Jody couldn't wreck a show even if she tried.
That sounds like a challenge.
We'd be too excited to have her.
Aw.
People keep talking about heaven and eternity and stuff, but it's too big. That's from Zoe. Then Barbara Jane, watch the upholstery. It's flimsy. Zoe, I don't know. It's scary and it's sad. I hate it, and I hate her for going away. She wasn't supposed to leave me. And then a bit of a scene shift here. She's not here. Barbara Jane, the astronaut. I'm out of accessory packs. I'm sorry. Zoe, she probably wouldn't want to see me anyway. Barbara Jane, why on earth would you say that? Zoe, I got rid of the dolls she gave me and said they were for babies, and I didn't talk on the phone that much, and I didn't say goodbye. Barbara Jane, why not? Zoe, she was asleep. I just held her hand. I was scared to try and wake her up. And Barbara Jane, maybe sometimes that's enough. Then someone off panel, you're hurting her. So,
Are we really stopping? Oh man,
yeah.
it's so brutal that we're making you read this out loud. I'm sorry, I love this card.
No, that's okay. I got all my crying out when I wrote the script, so.
Yeah, what was funny is that like I had heard like that like people cried when they read it, and I was like, challenge accepted. I'm not gonna cry. And then I read it this morning and was like, oh, that's so sad.
My editor for this story, Sarah Miller, apparently cried every time she worked on it. And people in the office would come up and be like, are you okay? And she'd be like, no, I'm editing the story. You want to read it? And they'd be like,
No.
So,
how many more? Are there just 2 more pages?
There's,
Yeah.
8 pages.
Let's do the last 2 pages now,
Okay.
and then
Oh,
get
and
into
then-
the.
and then get
I'm
into the
sorry.
okay, and then go back to
The
page
flow
5.
of the
for
story's too good.
Okay. So, hold on, page 7.
I'm throwing a mutiny so we can get to the end of this beautiful story.
Yeah, back in the funeral home, Barbara Jane, let's go shopping and eat ice cream. Zoe, I'm just holding her for you. Zoe, I think it's time to go in. And then, shoot, Carly? Yeah. Carly, Barbara Jane is scared. She's never seen a dead person before. Silent panel, silent panel, silent panel. Carly, she looks wrong. Yeah. And that's it for dialogue in the...
Oh, but it's okay that it's okay because this is
And then the title.
this
And the story.
This is what made me cry.
Oh.
Like these like just the holding of the doll is where like I lost it.
Yeah.
Because there's I don't even know what that is. Like I don't know what that is except like these 2 sisters have been fighting and now they're not, and it's just like I don't even know what to say about it except that it made me cry. That's where I lost it.
Well, I would apologize, but I'm not sorry.
No, nor should you be. That's the power of storytelling. The human, like, this is our human experience. I think it's maybe like speaking towards the acceptance of death. I don't know. It's just like
Yeah,
the
well, I
acceptance
mean-
of death and the need of each other and like the need of sisters and brothers and siblings and everything else. Like the loss of a loved one. Like
Yeah, I wrote this script about 1.5 years after my grandmother passed away, so a lot of the stuff was pulled from that. And I think there were things I hadn't like quite worked through yet.
Sure.
So that was, writing can be therapy. But no, and I, it's like me and my younger sister, we're old enough now, we weren't fighting like this, but I sort of think back like to when I was younger and my grandfather passed away, like if we had been at that funeral, like as opposed to the one we had just gone to as adults, like what would that have been like?
yeah.
So that, yeah, it was a little bit from different points in my life all pulled together. So that's one thing I will say is like put as much of yourself in your stories as you can, because I think it'll read truer. People can tell, when it's
Yeah.
artificial versus when there's like something real behind it.
So let me ask you, and this is like coming from the perspective. This is like I'm in the chat right now, everybody. I'm legitimately asking this for myself. How do you infuse yourself into the stories? Like that seems to be like one of the biggest problems that I have in terms of like screenwriting, writing a novel. Like because I've tried to write everything at some point in my life. Like how do you infuse yourself? Like is it just like I'm having a hard time accepting the death of my grandmother, and I'm going to like what is the missing link of I'm having a hard time accepting the death of my grandmother to the page? Like, what's that link? Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, I think for me, especially because I write so many different types of characters, I have to find the thing in that character that I can relate to, or the thing that I have in common with them. And that's sort of the bond there, I think. I mean, with Zoe, it was pretty easy because she's dealing with something I had dealt with. But, you know, it's like the little sister was maybe a little more based on my sister, but also like the way you sort of make excuses when you can't quite deal with things, you know, like how, you know, it's like, oh, it's Barbara Jane who's sad, not me. So like, that's something I can, even though as an adult, like I can still sort of understand that, the way you sort of try to push your feelings onto something else so you don't necessarily have to deal with them. So I think it's really that. It's like finding the commonalities between you and everyone in the story. Like everyone in the story should at least be a little bit of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now,
If that, I don't know if that answers your question.
how
it
did
does,
this one
it
come
does, it
about?
absolutely
Like, did they invite you to pitch something for this anthology and give you a color, or did they let you pick a color?
That's exactly what happened. Sarah asked me to pitch something and gave me a color, and my first thought was magenta makes me think of 90s Barbies. And then I was like, no, that's stupid. And I came up with a completely different story than this, which was like a horror thing, apocalyptic thing. And, you know, I sent an outline to Sarah, and she was like, this is cool. Here's a whole bunch of questions because there's elements of this that don't work. And I took that horror story and tried to rework it, and there were kids involved, and then it somehow turned into this thing. And I didn't even send her an outline because I just sort of wrote this. I wrote a lot of this script on a lunch break at my day job.
Oh my God.
Like sitting
The plumbing job? Or?
No, the one I had before I quit to go freelance, which was working for a nonprofit. So I'm sitting in a conference room on my lunch break, writing a script and weeping and hoping no one walks in on me. So I ended up writing this whole script over the course of a day and sending it to Sarah. Like, I didn't even send an outline or the new pitch. I'm just like, here's the story, and hoping she'd like it. And I had a voicemail from her that was just like, oh my God. And she's like, I love this. This is perfect. So, and there were some notes, but they were pretty minor. So the script here is almost entirely what I sent in that day. Which is like, that almost never happens. And the fact it does happen once in a very long while makes every other first draft frustrating. Because you're like, occasionally I can get a first draft and then just nail it. So why do the rest suck?
Yeah. So we have a question here from Compel Bass saying, counterpoint to Matt's question, how do you write a character that isn't part of you or the complete opposite?
Well, I mean, there still has to be like some human trait. Like, I think if there was something that was just so alien to you that you had no context for anything they do or say, like, well, I don't think you would be writing that character. Like, that's, and if you think that might just not be a character you want to write. Like, even the craziest, like, psycho murderer character, like, there has to be some element of logic behind what they're doing that you can understand. Like, even if you're writing the Joker, you have to understand what his logic is behind what he's doing, even if, like, it's completely bizarre and nonsensical to everyone else. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any character that can ever be truly like the complete opposite of us in any way, because we contain multitudes and paradoxes. And
It's like the old Terence, I think, the Roman playwright, nothing human is alien to me.
Yeah.
I guess you have to.
And of
think
course,
like that.
all of the aliens that we tend to write in science fiction have some element of humanity to them.
Except
Like
Lovecraft
even-
ones, and that's the point.
Yeah, that's the point.
You don't write them. You write everybody else not being able to deal with them.
Do you want to? Should we go over the script then for those?
Yeah, what do you
4
want
pages?
to? I'd love to know anything that you want to share on these
Okay,
last 4
so
pages.
this one, which is page 5.
And thank you for letting me roll ahead there. I just
Are we in
this
the?
book is too wonderful. We'll give it one more sec to come up. We are being very demanding today.
And Chief is being very patient with us.
Thanks, Chief. Yay. So this is interesting because the first panel description here says, a life-size Barbara Jane wearing a floppy magenta hat, sunglasses, vintage day dress, and driving gloves steers a convertible down an empty scenic road. Bright daylight. Zoe curls up on the passenger seat looking out the window. And he did a much wider shot, which established that, but then the second panel here shows pretty much all of the detail.
He used all those details.
So
in
that
this
was really,
second panel.
that was actually, I think, a genius thing to do, because it's sort of establishing like they are gone from where they were before. And if you had focused if this had been the first panel, you wouldn't have gotten that transition at all. You wouldn't have gotten the new setting at all. So this is much cleaner, I think.
So your second page turn was like, where your first page turn was the sort of slight departure of reality. It was just a tilted head. The second page turn was full on opening the doors to a pink convertible and landing in a different landscape.
And the thing is, because of the color scheme he chose and the fact that Barbara Jane isn't just wearing magenta, she is permanently magenta, like her skin and everything, it's very clear that this is the same doll that she was talking to. So that is also pretty cool.
And she's basically like fully now invested in this new reality.
Yeah, and
Like the magenta reality.
and hopefully the reader is too, and it's not just like, what's wrong with these people making this story? They're weird. And then, yeah, it sort of transitions to, it describes a sunset, which you don't necessarily see the sunset, but you get hints of the changing light because it's very bright there and it's getting darker by this panel. And then it's, hold on, this I keep hitting the tappy thing that
The tappy tap?
zooms all over.
Phones.
The car drives off toward a starfield sky. And he actually, I don't remember if I intended it to be the car leaving. I don't think it was intending that the car would necessarily go into the sky, but I love that effect so much. It's so
Yeah.
perfect. So again,
That's actually really interesting. 'cause
artist
that's-
choices.
That's like he interpreted it, your words, to be that because that's what the story was saying to him,
Yeah.
which is so cool. Like it's such a collaborative. Like just seeing this, like just proves how much of a collaborative effort the final product actually is.
Yeah, and
It's so
then
cool.
so we get paid where page 6 is there. Yeah, so and
So,
he
yeah.
also did this amazing thing where the panel borders are pretty much gone for these first 3 panels. And it's space. Is the Barbara Jane wears a magenta trimmed astronaut suit. Zoe floats alongside her, completely exposed to the vacuum, but none the worse for wear. And it did for the second panel, it say Zoe smooths down her skirts as it starts to float up. Zoe wraps her arms around herself, eyes squeezed shut tight. And I love what he did with the tears.
Like kind of floating
There.
away
Oh,
from her
oh,
eyes
that's
and
actually-
eyes.
Very Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it really
is in the
is.
script for panel 4 does say tears floating away from her face, droplets in the 0G, but he seeded
This is
that.
here, yeah?
Yeah, but he seeds that in the previous panel rather than just doing it for the
But
first
it is
time.
fascinating that you have panel 1, panel 2, and panel 3 over here, but he treated it as one panel.
We can't
But-
see.
But it's still, it still has that separation because you can
Yeah.
see the characters the multiple times. So you get the separation without the actual panel borders. And I love the effect of that.
And one of the things that I and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but one of the things I loved is that the stars almost look kind of like the tears, except they're colored differently. So
Oh,
like
interesting.
in my head, I immediately was like, oh my God, she's kind of floating in a sea of her own tears.
I
but
have never got that before, so
that-
thank you.
but
for
I
that.
also
That's awesome.
I also kind of think that's probably just my own take on it.
And there's also, if you look here, this is it's them to the gutters.
What's a gutter?
Gutter is the stuff outside of the panel. But if you see here, it transitions from the dark of space back to white as we sort of head back to reality for the last 2 pages.
For
was-
the next page turn.
Is that what, did you write? Is that something that you wrote, or was that his own artistic sort of impression of what you needed?
That was his impression, I assume, because that's not in the script. In fact, I also like in the last panel here, Barbara Jane is dressed in normal clothes again, and that's not in the script either. Barbara Jane takes Zoe's hands in her own, the two face each other, the doll is all smiles again. That's all it said. But he could have interpreted all smiles again to being the way she looked from the beginning, too. So, again, cool artistic choices.
But because you have the off-screen voice, right? The off-screen voice is, you're hurting her, that's in your script?
Yes, that is yeah, it
So you
says-
can see where that could
Carly
lead him to be like,
off-panel.
right, the return to reality, I can aid it visually by doing this fade out of the star background in this corner.
Yeah, and it's cool that it's the same black dialogue box as the last time there was the transition, which was the first time Barbara Jane started sort of seeming alive. So then
What page is this?
this is page 7. And I don't explicitly say transitioning back, but you can see the color sort of does fade in this panel. Carly stands by the sofa in the lobby of the funeral home, her eyes wide on the verge of tears again. Zoe looks at Barbara Jane, back in the magenta ball gown and blank smile. Her arms are outstretched and Zoe's hands are clamped tight like she's trying to rip them off. So, and it's not quite as violent in the art, but there's still the holding there, and you can still see there's it's a better transition from the previous panel, I think, where they're holding hands. They're still holding hands here. And then panel 2, right there, Carly clutches Barbara Jane tight, smoothing her hair. The suits and dresses file toward the double doors. Zoe rises from her seat on the sofa. I think it's time to go in. And then over there, Carly doesn't look at her sister eyes on the doll instead. So it's still like they're still not connecting there. And then there was actually a fourth panel here. No, they're all 6 there. Okay, these sort of combined a bit. Close to tears herself, Zoe manages a tiny half smile. She takes hold of Barbara Jane's hands with her thumb and forefinger, which is not entirely there. With the doll held between them, the girls step through the doorway into a room lined with pew-style seats and flower arrangement, a coffin sits open at the end of the long aisle. So we sort of stretched that action across these 2 panels in a little bit of a different way, and again, I think it flows better.
We get a good look at the holding of the doll, and we get a good look at them in the room.
Yeah, and panel 6 is like the sisters approach the coffin together, each still holding a hand of the fashion doll, and he just zoomed in tight on that. Which again, I can't
Beautiful
keep saying
choice.
Nathan is great, but Nathan is great.
Well,
I can keep saying Nathan is great.
I think it's important to also acknowledge, like, we have cues here as to which sisters are which.
Yeah, because Zoe's
She's like-
had the
she's
green
got a
nail
little
polish
dress
since the
and
beginning.
like green has always signified who like the sort of like man little girl of your story is.
Yeah, because she has the green nail polish and the green
And the green,
bracelets,
yeah.
but she does still have the pink barrette, so she's kind of like the full color scheme there.
Yeah.
And then the girls look up the spray of flowers in the coffin, barely in the panel, which again he ignored, wasn't needed. Both clutching the doll's arm tight. They're sad. That's where Zoe's just barely holding it together, but he chose to, and that's what it says in the script, but he chose to make her crying in that panel, which is fine because that's the last time we see her face. In this, Zoe's hand with her chip nail polish reaches over to rest on top of Carly's smaller hand, which is right there. The sisters clasp hands tight, the doll having toppled over without anyone holding on, and he chose to have them hugging instead, which better choice for sure. And he also designed this very cool credits page. I think he had like one with skulls before, and we're like, that's a little dark.
The flowers are.
Yeah,
like,
but I
nice.
think a little better choice. So
And then for those who couldn't stay,
yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh.
I'm not crying. You're crying. Stop.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chad. I could have brought something happier, but I like wrecking people apparently.
This is why I was like, you're right, Faith, but Faith is so uplifting.
Yeah, no, that was.
This is also uplifting. It's just a different kind of.
It's uplifting to space and death.
The truth is, that's 8 pages. That is
Yeah.
an 8-page story. You got a whole world, a set of character relationships, an emotional journey for a young girl like you and Nathan Fox got across in 8 pages.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what else to say, but it does show, like, if you can tell a story that big in that or even fewer pages, I mean, you're going to be able to do a lot when you have a 22-page issue, because you'll know how to best utilize the space.
And I think there's something to be said for it. That's why, like, building your sort of craft and your practice is so important, because, like, your cupcake was 4 panels.
Yeah, and they were
With-
just like little gags and pop culture references. And,
But
yeah,
that
very
being
funny.
said, and they are very funny. That being said, you're still telling a story. There's still an arc there. Like one of the ones that you've shown me was, I wish that they like what was the one? It was like I wish they could have stayed, or like something like
No,
that.
that's
like,
this one.
No, that's this one. I
Oh,
know,
it's
but like the sister like just.
oh
like,
yeah, the vanilla cupcake was like, oh my sisters all went to a birthday party. They sound like so much fun, songs and games. I guess they had a great time. Why else would they stay forever?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're literally cupcakes in a case. The other cupcakes have been eaten. Jody's a monster.
Yeah,
I am a monster.
You're a monster.
Yeah.
Well, it's this
I know what I am.
anthropomorphized cupcake who's like, can't wait for my sisters to come back. I feel so left alone.
Kind of wish
Oh,
I'd gone
well.
to that party. Sounds fun.
But like, there's a story there. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's just like one simple
Vanilla
little bitty
is
line.
dumb.
But
Vanilla's
there's
sweet.
character,
Vanilla
there's
is sweet
story,
and
like-
innocent. Yes.
So but like, I think it's important to acknowledge, like, yes, it's just 4 little panels. It's very simple, but you tell an entire story there. There's an arc. There's a beginning, middle, and end. And once you get that down, you can start to extrapolate that to 2 pages. That takes up how many panels? And then 5 pages, then 10, then 22, then entire 6-issue arcs. Like, it's
When's your 500-page original graphic novel coming out?
yeah.
Whenever I have time to write it. I mean, actually, the first story I wrote, it wasn't the first one that was published, but the first one I wrote for publication
and it was for a project that took a little longer to come out than Womanthology. It was a single double-page spread, and it was an entire story in a single double-page spread, and it was a rock star dealing with a bad review during the zombie apocalypse. And it's like, and he's really angry about it, and then he just stops and he hears all the zombies moaning outside, and then he records it, and he knows like how he's gonna like win over the reviewers next time. So it's like completely delusional, like, you know, the end of the world won't interrupt my art and my angst about my art sort of thing.
Amazing.
But it's like it's 2 pages, 9 panels in total, and I had to tell an entire story in that space because that was the space I was allotted.
Well, DeLovely says you're the most lovely monster.
Oh, thank you,
Most lovely kind
Sam.
of monster. Do you want to take some questions? Do we want to talk about this anymore? You're the professor. How would you like to
take some
proceed with your
questions
lesson?
because I'm not entirely. I've never gone through like a breakdown of a script like this and compared it to the finished
All right. Well,
product. So
Star Pilot Sex.
wow, wow.
Go
I
on.
was looking at Rocket. Very confusing. Star Pilot 6 says, do you have a good rule of thumb for figuring out how much story you can fit in a page or issue?
I mean, usually you start with a page limit, especially if you're writing an issue, and oftentimes if you're working on a story arc, you know, it'll be set up to fit into a trade. Like Mother Panic is 3 issue arcs. So the first trade, which is 6 issues, has 2 stories. But usually, you know, in advance, like, you know, this is going to be 4 issues that are 20 pages each or something like that. So usually you sort of go in knowing the amount of space you have, and then you can sort of tailor the story or the parts of the story you want to tell. Because sometimes you have, you know, the story's bigger than you have space for, so you have to pare it down to what fits and what makes sense.
What are the signs of that? Like, have you ever tried something and then been like, wow, that I was way off about how much I could get done in these 10 pages? I need to just zoom in. How do you know?
I mean, I actually tend to have the opposite problem because I did so many short stories, and Mother Panic was where this was most evident. The first draft of the first issue was essentially the first 2 issues crammed into one issue. And my editor's like, you know, you can have like splashes here, you can have atmosphere, you can give things time to breathe, because that was something I wasn't used to, having space to breathe. Because the first book I wrote that were full issues was the Orphan Black comic, and that was part adaptation, part new material. So I had a lot of stuff to cram in the 20 pages. So I was used to like being so restricted in space that you have to like, and Mother Panic is not a book that needs to go, it's a book that's like, and murder.
And also murder.
Yeah, so I mean, learning, I think it's easier to space things out than it is to compress, but a lot of writers, you know, will be like, oh God, I don't have enough pages. And sometimes I'm like, what do I do with all this space? So I might not be the best writer to ask that question to, because my experience has sort of led me to have the opposite problem. I write more compressed than I need to, where a lot of writers, I think, tend to be more decompressed because...
And compressed and decompressed are words you'll hear a lot in comics, and that just refers to...
just like essentially the density of the story to a certain extent. And again, a lot of stories now are written for trade, so the arc will follow however many issues are going to be in the trade.
We use this word a lot, but trade is the trade paperback, which means
This is
basically this guy, the collected edition of several individual issues.
Yeah, and some people will call
general.
those graphic novels, but usually I think it makes sense to distinguish between a trade, which is a collection of what was initially told as serialized issues, versus a story that was always meant to be one single volume, which is sort of what I consider a graphic novel.
There are cases where something is both. Essentially, Watchmen is both. It was published serially, but always meant to be one 12-issue thing, so it makes sense to use both terms for it. But yeah, generally we'd say trade for
And
this
again,
one.
novel, like prose novels are originally told as serialized too, so it's sort of floopy literary term. Literary terms are like, yeah.
So going along with like compression, decompression, all that stuff, like, and we noticed in this, like, there's the page turn. Like, it's like, here's the panel that leads to the next page.
Is that something you think about, or were you just accidentally amazing?
No, that's something I think about because that was the first note I ever got from someone who worked in comics, which is like, you know, think about your page turns. Who is an artist buddy of mine, Mark Engler, who actually did fan art for my first webcomic, and then I met him in person because we had a mutual friend.
That's awesome.
But he was like the first person I met who worked in comics, and I was like, can I send you this thing I wrote? And I sent him like that first like dreadful script I sent, and that was one of his biggest notes was like, use those transitions and those page turns. It's like an odd note. You start on page 1, and you generally like here, and it flips over to page 2 and 3. So your odd number pages, give them a reason to turn the page, essentially.
How do you determine that? Is that a question I can ask? How do you when you sit down with it, so in a screenplay, whenever I've sat down to write a screenplay, you figure out the structure first. Is it similar for comic books as you
I think the structure is pretty much in place because you'll know again how many pages you have to start, and you know that the turns are the odd pages. So it's sort of like how 3-act is sort of like a very standardized thing. So a comic is a very standardized thing in a way, and there are some variation. X-Files Origins I wrote was digital first. So we actually wrote the scripts were page 1 top, page 1 bottom, because each page was split in half for the digital, because they tend to be more half-page layouts for devices. But I was still thinking about how the page turn would work.
It must be tough to try to design it for both.
A little bit, yeah, but it actually, I found it weirdly went a little faster writing that, because it was subdivided so much that it actually almost made it easier to pace it out, as weird as that is.
So, again, this is a very selfish episode for me, because I really want to write comic. I love this. So this is just everyone else just stop listening, because now it's just the two of us. And Amy, sorry.
And Faith.
Sorry.
I'm gonna hang out with Faith. You guys talk about whatever.
Sorry, I didn't mean to exclude. I'm just oh my God, this is
No, I'm fine.
I'm so zeroed in. Now I feel really bad. Now I don't want to
Stop feeling bad and ask your question. You're taking all the fun out of being mean to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. So how do you? So when you sit down and you have even page turns, right? So do you sit down and say, cool, I've got 12 story beats that I have to hit, and then I have sort of nuanced story beats inside of those 12? Because right?
I think for me it's mostly instinct.
Okay.
And when scheduling allows me, I try to do do a page by page breakdown. So page 1, this thing happens. Page 2, this thing happens. And it's usually just a sentence or two. And then I'll take that and I'll script out from that. And sometimes I'll even do a middle step where I do all the action and then do the dialogue afterward. Sometimes I don't have time to do that, and I just sit down and write the script without outlining it. I don't necessarily recommend doing that. That always seems to take me longer, weirdly. But sometimes it's I have to write this. And sometimes I don't do it linearly. The weirdest scripting experience was the last issue of Rogue One, because there was a massive chunk of the movie that's the entire Battle of Scarif after the bombs go off, had to fit in 20 pages. So I actually started writing that backwards. I wrote the whole issue backwards to make sure I could fit everything in, because I knew what the end point was, and that was a weird experience. It felt more like I was playing Tetris than writing a comic. So, but hopefully the end result people like. That issue will be out in a few months, so we'll see.
Oh my God, that's intense.
That's fantastic.
That is so cool to know. I can't wait for that.
But yeah, I know not everyone writes comics linearly. I know Marguerite Bennett has said that she finds the point of the story she's most excited about and writes that scene first, which is a cool way to do it.
I know I've read interviews and heard interviews with Charlie Kaufman, who did Adaptation and Eternal Sunshine, where he does the exact same, but on a bigger screenplay scale, so 120 pages. He'll be cool, I really like the scene that's going to happen between these two characters. I think that's probably around page 30. I really like this idea that's around page 45, and he'll start branching out from there. So
yeah, I think for me it's less I'll do the ones I'm excited about, and if I'm a little stuck and there's a scene I know very well how it's going to go, I'll just write that first because it's there in my head already, and then I can sort of branch off and fill in the stuff that I'm a little bit iffier on, because a lot of times what's happening around it will inform that and answer any of the questions that I have that's sort of keeping me stuck from working on it.
Yeah, I just me personally, I've always I typically always know how I want Act 1, in screenwriting. I'll always know how I want Act 1 to start and end, and then from there I'm lost. So it's I can get to page 25, and then I'm I know this scene, I know this scene, I know this scene, so I kind of...
Page 25 is the killer point. I think it's if you don't drop off at 25. A lot of times you drop off at 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's-
typically I can get to 50 until I'm like,
Screenwriting.
ugh,
Yeah,
screenwriting.
yeah.
Which is a different thing. Sorry to bring that
For
into
me,
it.
a lot of times, especially if I'm, know the story beats that where the issue has to break in the middle of the larger arc. I'll know the beginning of the issue and the end of the issue, or what I think is the end of the issue. Sometimes you have to adjust a little bit, and then it's like the whole middle ground that's like the iffier part. So it's
Sure.
sort of like if the equivalent in the screenplay would be like, I know the first act and I know the third act, and then some stuff happens in the
Some
second
stuff
act.
happens
I
in the
think.
middle to get us there.
Yeah.
So do you have like kind of a beat structure in terms of like a climax and like what you would have in screenwriting, like an escalation? Do you have like a by page 4 this should be happening, or like by
No.
page 4 this is the act, or you just
No, I kind of wing it.
is that typical for like just across the board for the medium?
I mean, I think so. I think because everyone's coming from different backgrounds. So people like you and me have that screenwriting training and know how that works in screenwriting. But a lot of people, there are people coming from prose, and there are people who have always focused specifically on comics. So I think there's just so many different approaches coming into the medium that, and again, most people haven't studied comics writing formally. Like I have my MFA in creative writing, but I never took a class specifically in comics writing because they didn't have that yet. And the Emerson, where I got my MFA, does now, and it's being taught by one of my classmates who was in
That's
the same
awesome.
class as me. But again, that didn't exist then. Yeah,
So I should
lot of
move
people
to
are-
Emerson.
yeah, or
I should-
in Boston, yeah.
Yeah, I should move to Boston and get my MFA. And
I mean, if you,
From
if
your
you-
classmate.
it's not cheap. Right.
money's no object. I don't know if you
Okay.
know me. I'm very wealthy.
Oh, awesome.
I feel like this should have come up earlier.
Yeah, I'm very
I need
wealthy.
you to buy a lot of things for the show.
Will do.
Okay,
They'll all
great.
be here next week.
Fantastic.
That's called sarcasm.
I
No, you
figured.
said it on the internet. It's bound
oh,
now.
now it's
Now
it's
it's
bound.
thing.
Sarcasm on the internet is true.
Thank you for letting me hijack the conversation for a
that's
bit.
fine.
I apologize. I will now sit back
Stop
and shut up.
apologizing.
I feel bad that I was like, no, you're not included anymore. I just feel bad
You
now.
didn't actually say that, though, I'm pretty sure.
No, but like I was like,
I can never joke with you. Oh no.
no, you can joke
No,
with
I
me
think that
just
means
like-
you have to do it more and more
Oh,
and more.
no.
Or maybe that's the evil person in me talking.
Jody,
That's
as
the
previously
cupcake
mentioned,
murderer.
monster.
Yeah, I'm
no,
a monster.
of course you can joke with me.
What's the best note you've ever gotten from an editor?
I mean, my favorite note period didn't come from an editor. I had a list of notes from Gareth Edwards for the Rogue One script, and my favorite note in that was like, in this scene, maybe there can be space camels. And I'm like, yes, if I put nothing else in this book, there are going to be
There
space
will
camels.
be space camels.
And that's just my favorite note. I don't know. I'm trying to think because I've had so many really good editors, and I don't know. It's like,
But it might be that once they've helped you find the new thing, you probably can't even remember what it was before.
I mean, I have I save all of my emails, so whatever jewel it was, it is in an email somewhere. But I mean, sometimes like the best thing an editor can tell you is when you're doing something right, because a lot of writers and artists, like, everyone's heard the we're our own worst critics thing, but that's true. Like sometimes we don't know if what we're doing is effective, but sometimes if they're like, this thing is good, do more of it like this. That can sometimes be the most helpful thing, because you don't necessarily know when you're on the right track. It's hard to be objective about that sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't think of any specific examples that was like the one note that taught me. I mean, going aside from that, like the thing that I mentioned before about the paying attention to transitions.
Yeah.
Because that was like defining for not only how I wrote comics, but what I started paying attention to when I started reading comics to figure out how they worked.
So Ginquisitor says that you need Taliesin here to help torment me.
Oh, we'll work on it.
I'm actually pretty easy to torment.
Apparently,
But-
it's no fun. You feel
Good to
bad.
know.
No, I feel bad very easily, but that doesn't mean that I feel bad. Like I'm not like over here just like, oh, everyone hates me.
Cut to Mac, he's still apologizing 3 hours from now.
Question: will you give a shout out to your European fans before you switch schedules so we can't watch anymore? Oh, Andrea Cortez.
We thank you so much for watching. We hope that if some of you are able to, you will follow along on the VOD. For those who may not have been around for the announcements earlier, there is a new schedule coming to Geek and Sundry Twitch.
That is July.
July
right?
5th?
July. I'm gonna
Yeah,
look
it's
at
the
my
first,
calendar.
whatever the first Wednesday in July is.
And so
like
this
this,
show
yes.
will stay around. It will be on the new schedule, but it will be later in the day.
But
And
still
we know
on Wednesday, because it would be weird to have the Wednesday club on a day that wasn't Wednesday.
On a Tuesday. That's not when it is. It's on Wednesday nights.
But we know that this will work better for some people and worse for others, and we deeply love all of you who have been watching and being
Stupid
part of
round
our
planet.
community. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we can find a way to continue getting the show to you during a different time. We don't want to take the show away from you, so we can only come on when they tell us to. Question from Solomon Kane 76. Jody, would you recommend the Joe Kubert's comic book creating school? Do you know anything about
I
that?
know people who have done that on the art side. I personally don't have any specific experience with it, so I can't say anything to it. But I know people who studied art with Joe Kubert actually when he was still around. So there are people who work in comics who went through there, and that's as much as I can say about it. That's as much as I know about it, really.
Also, nice name, Solomon Kane.
Autistic, yeah, it's a good name. Autistic Cosplay says, Jody and Matt, how do you motivate yourself to practice writing? I am very bad at it.
Deadlines and people who will yell at you if you don't meet them, and that is. I wish I had a better answer than that.
But before you had deadlines and people who would yell at you, when you were just
there
doing
was-
your like web comic and stuff like that, and that was just you, how did you motivate
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, I imagine there were people who actually were reading it and would yell at me even when no one was. I did have a stretch of time where a friend of mine who is also a writer, we set up like an accountability email thing where every Monday we would email like what our goals were for that week, what our goal was from last week, and if we'd actually achieved everything. So, and I mean, she was a good friend, so she wouldn't actually like yell at me, but knowing that someone would share my shame if I had goofed off and didn't get anything done that week, that did help. So. That's finding someone who will hold you accountable, even if they're not paying you money, is helpful.
Just since you asked both of us, my perspective on that is that I just want to be better. And the only way to get better is to continue practicing and writing and then getting it into people's hands that you trust and letting them read it and be like, this is terrible, here's how to fix it, or whatever it is. That tends to be my response. Well, this is awful.
If you're more lazy like I am and not like Matt, find people to yell at you.
Let's see. To the writer, since you mentioned Twitter, any great feeds as any great feeds I, as an aspiring writer, should follow?
I would say whatever comics you're reading that you like, find the creator. A lot of the creators are going to be on Twitter. Follow them, see who they follow, and have cool interactions with. There isn't like you must follow this person.
Yeah.
But yeah, to follow the people who inspire you, see who inspires them, follow them. If you go to conventions and you meet people at conventions, keep in touch with them on social media.
I think that's one of the best things that you can do is find like a local comic book convention and go there and meet the artists and writers that are there and just talk to them. There's hundreds of comic book conventions always happening around the world. You may have to travel for 2 or 3 hours to get to one. Well worth your time, especially if you want to be in the industry.
Yeah, and especially if you're a writer who's looking to just start out, going around Artist Alley, finding artists, asking them their rates, because never expect an artist to work for free. So important. Finding someone that you can collaborate with on a short story, which, again, that's another good reason to just start with a short story rather than a full comic, is it's a lot less expensive to pay an artist for, 4 to 8 pages than it is to pay them for 20 to 22 pages and perhaps multiple issues.
And it is a very reasonable way to do it. I know folks who have just saved up enough to pay an artist for their short story. It's a way that they know they'll be rewarded for their time, and you will be rewarded by having a piece of work you can show people.
I'm currently actually doing that, like saving up some of the money that I get from this show actually to pay an artist eventually, because I have like 2 or 3 short stories I want to do. But I'm a terrible artist.
Oh, I'm a terrible artist too.
I can barely draw stick figures.
I mean, I had to get those Photoshop skills in place before I could even think of doing webcomics. But the interesting thing was then I was sort of limited by my artistic lack of skills to what I could write. So that was actually another good writing tool, is like, well, I'd like to do this crazy thing and I can't. What can I do with a character who doesn't move or have limbs? Yeah, essentially. So yeah, learning to work within limitations is one of the best things you can do, which fits in with the shorter page count. But the first comics I actually wrote were all silent. So, and that helped me get a feel for the format without having to depend on dialogue to convey what was happening. So that was a good tool.
Miss Sunflower 94 asks a question, and this cuts straight to the heart of me because I'm from Texas. So if you want to break into comics and you're in the middle of the Midwest, how much of a disadvantage are you at?
You don't actually have to live anywhere specific to work in comics. It's not like TV where you'd be expected to go and participate in a writer's room. It's done pretty much all through email. I mean, Gail Simone, who is a huge name in comics, lives in a small town in Oregon somewhere that I keep forgetting the name of.
Yeah, and I think Bindis lives in Oregon. If I'm...
A lot of people live in the Portland area.
A lot of people live in the Portland area, but Jason Aaron, I think, is still in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, there's actually a decent comics community in Kansas City, as far as I understand.
Is there really?
Yeah, there's a bunch of us in LA here, especially since DC moved out. A bunch of people still in New York, where Marvel and Valiant still are. So there's a lot of pockets of comic creators all across the country, a lot of them centered around where publishers are, and sometimes just where people who wanted to work in comics came up together and, you know, sort of have come into the industry at the same time and formed their own little communities. So I would say, because Texas, is it? Well,
I'm from Texas myself, so Midwest.
Yeah, but there are definitely conventions in the Midwest. Again, find the closest conventions to you, find the people who are closest to you who are also interested in comics, and sort of form those bonds, because the people who come into the industry at the same time as you, it's sort of like, you know, your graduating class in a way. It's like the people you're going to be hanging around with quite often. Yeah, I mean, that's like, for me, it's like, you know, like Jackson and Colin, Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly were people I met, and we were all starting to come into comics at the same time, and Margaret Scott, you know, there's a whole list of people, and they'll sort of always be like we were all baby comics people together.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a writer, have like a few story ideas, maybe have like a script kind of beat out to explain it. And if you're an artist, just have some stuff to show off. And that's when like you're going to the convention and you're trying to meet people that you want to collaborate with. That would be another suggestion, but
yeah,
I'm not in the comic book industry, so like, what do I just
no, that's actually accurate, because when I had done several short stories, I packaged it together like a portfolio, so I have something I could email to editors if they wanted to see more of my work.
Yeah.
You know, I had stuff that was on Comixology, so I could link them to that, and also be like, look, I'm a person who's real. And yeah, be willing to give editors your work for free. Don't expect anyone to like go out and buy your comic necessarily. If you do like a creator-owned comic, you know, have a stash of issues that you can just either give to editors at conventions, which I've heard mixed things on. Like some editors aren't really able to bring a lot of stuff back with them, so stuff might get left behind. But you can also, it's very easy to find the mailing addresses for publishers. If there's an editor whose line of books you really like, send them a sample of your work. You know,
and you'll notice paying attention to who is editing the comics you enjoy, if you're an aspiring creator, is a very good idea.
Yeah, don't email someone who works on the Batman books and tell them how much you want to write Superman.
Yeah.
Or even worse, Spider-Man.
Yeah, definitely don't do that.
Yes.
Boy, oh boy, I sure do love Spider-Man. Here's 7 ideas I have for the story.
Yeah, but it's important.
We're Valiant. Get out of here, kid.
Yeah, you don't want to do like a blanket solicitation to editors, like, hey, look at my work. Like, make sure that editor knows why you're reaching out. It's like, you know, back in the day, before Stephen Wacker left comics to go to animation, I would have reached out to him and be like, hey, I really love, you know, like Hawkeye and Daredevil and all the books coming out of your office. That's the type of comic I want to write. So, you know, be targeted in who you're reaching out to.
And I forgot who asked it, but I saw, here we go. Aromia Fleiss, do I need an agent to break into the writing industry? Like screenplays, more or less, yes.
Yeah,
but like
not really for comics. The only people, I mean, there's people who have managers, sure, especially when you get to a higher level and you're dealing with a lot of creator-owned properties that you might be optioning. But for someone like me who's just doing work for hire, I mean, editors reach out to me directly. I do all the interaction with them. I don't have representation at the moment. A lot of
talent managers, agents watching this show, Jody, currently needs representation.
But also, a lot of times, the only people you'll see working and work for hire comics who have representation are international artists who may not speak English either as their first language or at all. So their agent will also serve as their translator, which is, you know, kind of necessary for working with English-speaking publishers. But yeah, it's not something that's necessarily needed.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, to put it bluntly, like the portion that an agent would get from a comics job will not pay for much of anything.
Very fair. So, Chief, I hate to put you on the spot, but you wrote a comic book also, and you self-published. Can you set the camera on a wide and come in here and tell us about that experience for like 2 minutes?
Yeah, well, I got Hollywood there, so I'm gonna let her TD.
Yeah, Hollywood, do it. Chief, do you want to hear? Take my seat. I want.
I can just kneel.
No, take my seat. I'm gonna sit.
I'm at the same height as Amy and Jody.
Aw, that's adorable.
One of us.
One of us.
Yeah.
I hate to put you on the spot like that, but you self-publish, and I think that's an amazing thing, and that's another avenue that creators can take. So why don't you talk about that experience with us? Real quick?
Well, you guys were talking about bringing stuff to cons. I literally did. There's a panel that they do every year at I know they do it at WonderCon in San Diego. Or it's not even a panel. It's just a room. There's the Creator Connection panel.
Oh yeah, I've been to that.
Yeah, I went to that with one sheet for a book that my writing partner and I wanted to do because we had written it as a short web series and no one would pick it up. So, but we were
Awesome.
like, this works as a graphic novel, and I scripted it out, converted the script into what it would look like on paper. And I met with it's literally like speed dating for
Yes, yeah.
writers and artists. So I just walked around a room and sat with a bunch of different artists and showed them what I wanted to make. And I connected with one young college student named Kezia Jaranek, and she was interested. And so we worked together. We paid her what we could. And we wrote a 10-page story and submitted to Comixology, and now it's there.
Oh yeah, that's a good avenue for a lot of people who are looking to self-publish. Comixology has a section called Comixology Submit that's all creator-owned work, and they have very specific guidelines laid out for submitting your work. I have 2 volumes of Cupcake Pow on there.
Do you really?
Yes, and eventually I will get the other 3 because each volume is like a full year's worth of strips. So, and I did Cupcake Pow for 5 years. So those will get up there eventually when I have time to do things. Yeah.
And what's the name of your comic?
It's called Kid Cop.
Give us the pitch.
So Kid Cop is a 6-year-old, the youngest detective on the LAPD. He's 6 years old.
6 years old.
And
Totally beat out that 8-year-old kid.
Yeah. That kid was nothing.
It's set in a world much like The Wire. So everyone is dark. It's dark, gritty. It's almost all in black and white except for some red here and there. No one acknowledges that he's a 6-year-old, and because he's a heavy drinking Capri Sun detective. So he's basically he's like Mackie on the Shield. He's just really violent, and the first issue has him seeing a Salvation Army Santa who's dealing drugs, and he's not okay with it because
He shouldn't be.
Yeah, but he figures out look, how can Santa be in the North Pole and downtown Santa Monica at the same time? Jumps out of the car and chases him. But yeah, it's available on Comixology Submit, so you can just find it on Comixology for 99 cents. Because they wouldn't let us give it away for free.
Yeah, you have Comixology as a minimum 99-cent charge for your books. So
Can you do a first issue free or just every once in a while?
they sort of do that on their own. Comixology does a
kinda
lot of
figure that out,
sales.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can pretty much just select if you want your work to be part of promotions or not.
They say it's related to conditions with the Apple Store.
Sure.
Yeah,
They can't charge you nothing. It has to be in 99-cent intervals.
because Apple wants a share of it, and they can't take a share of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you working on it anymore?
We'd love to. We actually.
Haha.
No.
Well, that was.
Well, I'm right here, so.
You can
Chief?
fix it.
Chief?
Chief. Oh, there he is.
Chief.
Wow, you're so fast.
My emphatic gesturing killed my mic.
Oh, that's right. I'm not on. We're on Lavs today.
Oh,
I hope
you can hear
Oh,
Chief.
audible.
We
I'll
normally
just-
have mics.
Everyone.
I'll just keep speaking louder.
Yeah. That.
I will lean in
Okay.
closer.
Everyone seems to be hearing it. That's hilarious. Yeah.
But yeah, like we've submitted to it's sort of like this. Like we're trying to figure out what to do with it next. Is we ran out of money, so
Sure. Happens.
Which happens in
yeah.
comics quite often.
But
Yeah.
so we're hoping that we've submitted it to a few places. So far, no bites. But we have the story now, and we have something. We have a sample. So
Yeah,
That's
it's
amazing.
Yeah.
That's hugely important.
And a big way that we mentioned before that a lot of people will fund their creator-owned books is Comic Solid or Kickstarter. Kickstarter, the other one that starts with that sound.
Yeah.
And the first few anthologies I was a part of were funded on Kickstarter. And there's even people who do image books and fund it on Kickstarter because with image it's fully creator-owned.
Yeah.
But you generally have to pay your art team, your letterer, colorist, if you want an editor or freelance editor out of pocket. So a lot of people will fund their book first so they have the money to produce it before Image publishes it.
Yeah, most image books, they don't pay you up front. They take a cut as they publish it, but that means that somebody's got to pay.
And making a comic is less expensive than a lot of other, it's a lot cheaper than doing a short film or a web series, but it's still expensive, especially if you're paying people like reasonable rates.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go get back behind
Yay,
the camera.
dude!
Yay!
No, thank you. That's awesome.
Cop.
Kid
Keep
Cop.
up!
Go
Keep
buy
up!
it. Thank you,
The link is
Chief.
in chat.
Be like the 11th person to buy it.
So, Jody, speaking of like future projects, what have you not gotten to do yet that you want to?
Creator-owned series, actually. That's sort of next on my list when I have time, which I don't have at the moment because I'm writing up to 6 or 7 work-for-hire books at the same time. That's another good thing. Don't take on more work than you can actually get done by the deadline. And I've actually have turned things down. But if you think you can maybe make the deadline, don't take the job and let them know that's the reason. Don't be afraid to say no to things because it's better you say no than you do a bad job or miss your deadlines because you're only as good as your reputation.
Yeah.
And people who miss deadlines, especially if you're a writer, because you're the first step in a production process. And if the first step is late, that gives everyone else less time. So you're basically completely screwing over all your collaborators. Don't be that person.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way because I write for Geek and Sundry and stuff like that, but I also have done ghostwriting for commercials and stuff like that. I supported myself 3 years that way, and it would be I got to a point where I was I've got to say yes to everything because I keep missing jobs because I'm saying no. But then I would be I have 4 commercials to write today. Shoot me in the face. How am I going to do this? This is impossible. And so it's a fine balance of say yes, but sometimes you got to say no.
And just the biggest thing editors will say is communicate. If there's a problem, if you're going to be late, let them know as soon as you know. Don't disappear because you're scared they'll be mad because it's a lot of times there's maybe a little padding built into the schedule or they can figure out how to work around it, but they can't get the schedule on track if they don't know there's going to be a problem with the schedule.
Yeah.
So,
Do not ghost your boss.
yes, don't ghost your boss or they will never hire you again.
Hey, the deadline was 2 days ago. Where are you at with that? Oh, I better not take that call and just get it to him as fast as I can. Yeah.
No, a good example was back when I was working on Orphan Black, I hit my head on a door and gave myself a concussion. And I had a script due on Friday, and if you've ever had a concussion, brain stuff, it's brain damage.
Yeah.
You're not
thinking about writing
operating
anymore.
normally. Oh, I was trying to write. It was just going really slow, and it was very frustrating. But as soon as I knew I actually had a concussion, I emailed my editor and was like, I know the script is due Friday. Can I have the weekend? I have brain damage. I need more time. and it was fine because, I let him know early enough that he could work around that. But yes, let your editors know as soon as there are any issues. And again, be honest. If an editor's can you turn a script in by whatever day? If you think there's a chance you're not going to be able to, say I need to this day, because it's always better to turn in something early than late.
All right. Well, I'm going through.
I saw one amazing question from Puffy Butt, which was, how dare you suggest we are robbing a bank?
We're not robbing a bank.
A reference to Eric's TBD RPG, which we do on Fridays here.
We would
in
never
which we
rob
are
a
not
bank.
robbing a bank.
Yes.
You're not robbing a bank.
That
No,
wasn't us.
God.
Those were other people.
I saw that and was I don't understand. Did we talk about? I don't remember saying anything.
You were
about
just
robbing a
what
bank.
is this question?
I was I do not understand this question at all.
What's the comic that's what was it, 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank? Is that the title? Yes, that is a comic that I do not write, but has one of my favorite titles.
Yeah, it's a really good comic.
The name of the comic is 4 Kids Walk Into a
Four
Bank.
kids walk into a bank.
I did write a short comic one time that was called A Zombie Walks Into a Bar.
Nice.
But it was different.
Oh, I don't
It
think I've read
was
that
a
one.
zombie
It was
in a
not
bar.
a zombie in a bar.
No, it was about a zombie.
it was a zombie in a bar.
Literally, the first panel is a zombie walking into a bar, and it's title: A Zombie Walks Into a Bar. It was a really messed up dark story.
What other questions? Ooh, oh, these are good questions.
Go for it.
And we don't have a ton of time, but Glory Cave asks, how do you decide which moments to include for the big plot points and which ones for pacing, deeper characterization, etc.? How do you strike that balance?
I mean, a lot of that is sort of instinct, like what feels right. You know, it's you know, sort
So
of
it's like write for years, then it gets easier.
I mean, and that's where outlining comes in. I mean, if you sort of outline it ahead of time, you can take a look and be like, well, this is really important. Am I putting enough focus on this? Or like, oh wait, this character's supposed to be in this issue. I should like make sure that I'm touching on them. That's happened before. I've forgotten to include characters and issues and had to write them into scenes afterward. But yeah, outlining and doing as much prep work as you can is probably the best way to figure that out.
Yeah. And I know we need to start wrapping it up, but I wanted to bring up this question because this is again important to me as a writer. This comes from Star Pilot 6.
Star Pilot, the number 6.
The number 6. How do you deal with imposter syndrome? And I don't understand this last part. And you literally an imposter.
And are you literally an imposter?
Are you literally
and if
an
so,
imposter?
OMG, what have you done with the real Jody?
Yeah.
There never was a real Jody to start.
We imagined her.
Bum, bum, bum.
I've always been a weird alien in a Jody suit. That's my stay in life. I mean, everyone deals with imposter syndrome, and that's the thing. That the best way to deal with imposter syndrome is to realize that almost everyone else in this industry feels the exact same way. And you know, it's like I always used to go to conventions and be like, "Who did I say something terrible to that they hate me now?" And then I found out like everyone does that. So. You know, comics is a weird industry. We're all sort of figuring it out as we go along. There's no such thing as an adult. Being grown up is a lie. We're all like figuring this out until we drop dead of old age.
I love it.
The reason this hits really hard to me is that like when I made Sunday Company at the Growlings, I was just like, oh, I don't belong here at all. Like these people are actually funny. Like I've tripped my way into this. I'm not funny.
I feel like that for all the RPG shows I do here, because like I've been doing comics a while now. I'm a little used to describing myself as a comic writer, but someone who plays RPGs on camera, like, especially when I'm sitting next to someone like, if I'm sitting between Amy and Taliesin, and like, what?
You're too good. Stop.
I had a very good friend of mine, Megan, who's getting married in a couple weeks, actually sent me like this beautiful article from a screenwriter. I can't remember who the screenwriter was, but it was a name. I was like, oh my God, that person? And it was, here's how I dealt with imposter syndrome. I feel like this all the time. And I was like, wait, if this, like a Charlie Kaufman level screenwriter feels like constantly an imposter, like.
It's like the Hulk. That's my secret. I'm always anxious.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, that's basically it. So the best way to deal with it, Star Pilot 6, is to realize that all of us are dealing with it.
Yeah.
Like all of us feel like imposters. All of us cannot are just like, oh my God, someone's gonna find out that like I tripped into this and I'm actually not good at this
and
in
also,
any way.
like if you're putting in the work, realize that you've gotten to where you are because you're putting in the work. I mean, that's an important thing to keep in mind too. It's sort of like you said from the beginning, like I hustle a lot and I have to realize it's like I put in effort to get where I am. It's not like there isn't a magic comic fairy that just comes and like, you work in comics now, congratulations. No, you have to work hard to get there. So just remember all the long nights you stayed up like, everything's terrible. And
All right, so we need to start wrapping it up.
Yeah, congratulations on your first DC trade paperback for Mother Panic in stores today. That was a coincidence, but a really exciting one. Check out Jody's work. Where can they find you online?
The best place to find me is Twitter. I am Jody_Hauser. There's probably, if you do the who dat, that'll also come up and give you a handy URL to link to. But yeah, that's the most common place I am online, and I do talk about writing there sometimes as well as other nonsense. And post lots of pictures of dice now because people seem to like that. I don't know. I have a lot of dice. I need to justify that somehow.
I'm Amy Dallen. You can find me at Enthusi_Amy.
I'm Matt Key. You can find me at the Matt Key. I want to close out with one of my favorite Steve Ditko stories. If you know me at all, you know I love Doctor Strange.
You do?
What?
What? I know.
Plot twist.
I wore this pin on my suit at my wedding. Like that's how much I love Doctor Strange.
That's adorable.
But he actually wrote a story that he loved about Doctor Strange so much that he decided, maybe it's true, I think it is true, he decided to keep the story for himself. And he never showed it to Stan Lee, he never showed it to anybody. It was a Doctor Strange story he wrote for himself. And that to me...
He wrote his own Doctor Strange fan fiction. That he's not showing anyone.
That he's never showed anyone.
Of his own character.
It could be an urban legend, but I take it as like the core of what writing should be. You write for yourself, and if anyone else likes it, then you're lucky. Like, it's like, yay, well, everyone else should see this story. And that's an incredible thing.
Addendum, if your editor's waiting on a script, don't say, nope, this one's just for me, and not turn it in.
Yep. Anyway, that's our show. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Goodbye. Thank you, Jody. Goodbye. Jody's amazing.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Rachel, we are covering The Three-Body Problem. This is a book that I should have collected from my bedroom and brought with me because I have a physical copy of it for the first time. But if you're joining us, a big hello. You could be watching on Geek and Sundry's Twitch. You could also be watching on Nerdist's YouTube and Facebook page. We love talking books and we want to talk about book discussions. We want